Caleb Calhoun with fantastic coverage of the Vols yesterday as Tennessee met with the media. Joins us from Off the Hook Sports. Your hair looks fantastic, Caleb. Don't worry about it. All right. So,
Okay.
Caleb, you and I were both struck, and it just, I was really struck when we both had the same notion when we got together on Quick Takes right after the press conference yesterday. And that was just Josh Heupel seemed just cool as Cheech and Chong, man. He was not phased by Florida week. He was completely chill, and that's not been the case previously at Florida or for Florida
No.
week.
Yeah, no, not at all. I've started to wonder. My theory yesterday was that his lack of SEC ties may have helped him because he's not as familiar with how intense this rivalry is. But at the same time, like Butch Jones didn't have any SEC ties, and oh my gosh, he panicked with Florida. I mean, if you watch 2015 and 2017 Florida games, it's like if you could make a top 15 list of what not to do coaching in a game, like 9 of them would be from Butch Jones in just those 2 games alone. So I agree. I think he was relaxed. It reminded me, it was always funny. We talked last week about how tight Fulmer would be for Florida. And I think that definitely helped when the Fulmer Spurrier rivalry was going. That definitely helped Spurrier a lot more. But I think part of that was, I'm just going to be honest, Dave, I don't know, you covered them a lot more than I did back in those days. I don't think Spurrier was ever that committed to detail as a coach. I think he just liked calling the plays. I mean, I think there's a rumor where in Washington one time he wanted to rush and hurry up practice so he could go golf. So I mean, that's just how Spurrier was.
Yeah, I think that he was in a position there where there was so much talent, and you have to remember it was a totally different age of football. So just hopping on a plane and going on a recruiting trip wasn't doable for a lot of schools. And he had so much talent in his backyard, you could almost just roll out of bed and get a 5-star. So he had so much talent on defense, and he was such an incredible play caller that he was one of the few guys that was successful that would leave the office a little bit early and let the chips fall where they may. Anything else stand out to you about the press conference yesterday, Caleb? I know Hendon Hooker visited with the media. We talked to Jacob Warren early in the week, and anything else by the group that talked Vols Florida yesterday from Tennessee's perspective?
Well, we talked a little bit about Heupel calling last year a turning point in the for the program. I think that you're right, Jacob Warren. We spoke Monday or you spoke with him Sunday. Florida game clearly means a lot to him in this game. I think what we're really getting from the players is, I mean, they're trying hard to pretend that this is just the biggest game because it's the next game on the schedule. And they were all very coached to say that. And I mean, yes, that's the right mentality you're supposed to have in football. But I'm sorry, I don't believe they weren't looking at Florida last week when they were playing Akron. And I don't believe they're not totally circling Florida this week, particularly when they have a bye next week. So the idea that, it's just the biggest game because it's the next one. Nah, come on. It's the biggest game for you guys for a lot of reasons.
Agreed. I know Amanda's wants to jump in here. Caleb's addition to the program brought to you in part by City Heating and Air Conditioning, cityheatandair.com. It's about integrity, 50 years in the North Knoxville area, servicing a 50-mile radius. That's City Heating and Air Conditioning. Amanda?
So you are the Tennessee expert. You are like the one person that when I go, people are giving me different opinions and views. I'm calling Caleb. I need to know what Caleb thinks about this, Tennessee question. So with that being said, we just talked to the Locked On 3 Florida, Brandon. We talked to him about Anthony Richardson and his impact or lack thereof on the game. How do you feel about that? Like, what do you think Anthony Richardson's going to bring? Or do you think that Tennessee's defense is just going to decimate him?
I mean, I will say that Dave and I were funny enough talking about this earlier in the week. I'm on the fence with Anthony Richardson in this way. Tennessee, as I said last year, their linebackers were so awful in spy usually with quarterbacks. That's why Matt Corral ran for 195 yards on them, and Matt Corral didn't run for 195 yards. Bryce Young runs now. He didn't run last year, but he ran against Tennessee. And so they are awful in coverage. But what those two guys had that Anthony Richardson doesn't have is they want to throw from the pocket first, and they're deadly from the pocket. So even though Anthony Richardson is mobile, it's hard for me to look at it's hard for me to see him having the same impact because you don't really need to drop guys in spy with Anthony Richardson. I don't think. I think you can get pressure from around the edges and just make sure you have proper coverages. And he's not really going to torch you from the pocket that much. So I don't think it's the same. I could see Tennessee's defense just absolutely torching him. But I mean, again, a lot of this I think is on Billy Napier. I don't think Napier has used Richardson right the last couple of games compared to how he used him the first game. And that's a question on its own. Like, okay, I mean, I've repeated this, but how good of a coach is Billy Napier? It's a little weird that you go away from exactly what was successful for you in the first game.
Well, apparently there might be an injury going on there with Anthony Richardson, even though he's listed as healthy. What Brandon just told us from Locked On Florida is that he may have an injury because he came up, I think he said hobbling in the Kentucky game, and then from then on hasn't ran hardly at all. So if that is the case, what do you do if you're Anthony Richardson and you're Florida? Like how's that going to play out against Tennessee?
Yeah, that actually would explain a lot if that's the case. I don't know Florida's answer at that point. I think they could be in real trouble. I say this. Tennessee has a very long-standing tradition of quarterbacks having their breakout game against them. Normally, it's backup quarterbacks. That's why when Kaden Slovis went down with Pitt a couple weeks ago, I was almost certain that whoever had come in was going to throw for 300 yards. This dates back to the 2001 SEC Championship game when Rohan Davey went down and Matt Malk came in, and John Chavis couldn't figure out how to stop the quarterback draw with the two best defensive tackles in college football that year.
That's actually my fault because I went ahead and booked my flight at halftime when it was announced that Rohan Davey and who was the tailback? LaBrandon
Tofield.
Yeah, when it was announced they weren't coming back for the second half in the press box, I went ahead and booked my flight to LA for the Rose Bowl when I also booked my hotel and had everything done. Tennessee was up 14-0, and that's why I don't gamble to this very day. It is my fault.
Oh my gosh, Dave, you caused that loss, the worst loss in Tennessee history.
I take full responsibility for it. It was booked. Fortunately, Delta had a 24-hour cancellation policy, and that was I was going to stay in Manhattan Beach for a week. I mean, it was going to be absolutely beautiful, and it's my fault.
Yeah, and as a journalist, you had probably been like, at that time, you were probably sick of covering Tennessee in the Citrus Bowl in Orlando. They were going there every other year, and you get to go to L.A.
Yes, Orlando is very, very muggy. And I tell you, the other place that's very overrated to cover a game is in Dallas. You wouldn't know it. You think of Dallas being a warmer city, but the thing is, it can be 78 degrees in December one day and 28 the next. And we were at SMU's campus, and the wind felt like it was hitting your bones. It was so cold. But anyway, I digress. I think there are two ways that Tennessee can lose this game. The two most likely ways. Number one is turnovers. We could say that about every game. But in particular, I want to go number two, gap integrity. I recall a recent game in which they were playing the Chiefs, and it was basically rush for, but they really weren't even rushing. They were just making sure that Patrick Mahomes stayed in front of them and didn't get past the line of scrimmage. Wasn't really even rushing the passer. If I'm Tennessee, that's the way I'll play Richardson. And I drop the other 7 guys because if they don't have gap integrity and he's able to bust some runs, then suddenly a drive and a game can get flipped.
I agree. And as good, I think largely Tennessee's done a pretty decent job on the defensive line this year, and particularly closing the holes on the run game, but they haven't really had a situation. They haven't really faced a rush offense like this. I think Florida, Marshall Johnson, I think is averaging, isn't it almost 10 yards a carry? It's something insane like that. We're not noticing it with Tennessee because there's been a lot of a solid pass rush, a lot of batted balls down, and they face 3 teams that, let's just face it, none of them run the ball that well. So I don't think we've seen any signs of whether or not Tennessee's good or bad in stopping the run. And this is going to be their first game to do that. And you're right, that's going to be key for the defensive tackles being in the right spots and closing the holes and things like that. And there were signs against Pitt that they were going to struggle with that. Amari Thomas played great against Pitt, but seemed to get out of position a couple of times. There was that long run Pitt had that was completely based on bad angles Tennessee took.
Hey, I want to play a clip real quick that I thought was really cool that I want to get your thoughts on, Caleb, because it's something you wrote about on offthehooksports.com. And you think of the Pitt game, and I think some fans thought, oh, Tennessee should just win that game. That's a ranked team on the road. That's the type of game that through Butch Jones and all those dudes that they probably lose. And it was very special to one young man, and that was Tennessee center Cooper Mays. Here are his thoughts about the biggest win of his career. And I was surprised that he said Pitt. High school or college at this point?
I would say the Pitt game really meant a lot to me personally. I don't know if everybody else feels like that, but I really it had a really special kind of impact on me because me being a Tennessee fan, games like that, I feel like in the past have sometimes not really gone our way. And, when it gets down, into spots like that, sometimes it doesn't go our way. So just for us to kind of pull one out on the road against a big time opponent with, a game that kind of went down to the wire, it was that's probably one of my favorite memories.
Would this top it?
Yeah, I think so. I think this would be a huge win. It would be a quick turnaround to have a different favorite game, but
yeah, I think that's correct. I think it would top it, and no doubt about it. But did that surprise you because you wrote about it? The Pitt was. I really thought that there was a chance he might go back to even high school, certainly last year, but he went with the Pitt game. That was a gutty win. I think Tennessee takes more pride in that than maybe the fan base.
Yeah, I think one that I would have thought he would have said, now he was hurt last year at times, and I can't remember the exact games he missed and played in, but I thought he played down the stretch most of the time. So I would have thought he would have said Kentucky last year because Kentucky on the road was really the first. Missouri was it's funny, Heupel talked about the turning point against Florida last year after they lost. Missouri was the first game where you would say Tennessee kind of arrived and has a chance to exceed expectations. Kentucky was the game that was the first real signature win of the Heupel era. And so I would have thought he would have said that. But you're right, Pitt's a little bit different. I think Pitt, not just beating a top 25 team on the road, but knowing that, okay, you're going, say what you want, you're going to beat Akron and go into SEC play 3-0, and it opens up the doors of possibilities for the season. I want people to know ahead of time, I picked Tennessee to start the year 5-0. I did not pick them to have a strong finish to the season, but I said the way things were laying out, I said back in January that the chips were falling in place for them to have a 5-0 start, and I'm sticking with that. And I think the toughest game for them was going to be Pitt, and I think they knew that. And so the possibilities that opened up because of them beating Pitt had to feel great if you were playing for them.
Man that's going to hop in there. Craft Treats has the treats that will make your pet feel better, whether it's the anxiety of loud noises around the holidays or family in town, whether it's car ride anxiety, whatever the case may be. You got to go to Craft Treats and they'll take care of you. And also with my dog, it's more arthritis. He's getting a little bit older. So we certainly are a big fan of Craft Treats. Amanda?
Yeah, my dog especially loves Craft Treats. Like whenever I take her somewhere, she hates loud noises. So you give her one of those, and she's good to go. Let's circle back to. I hate that term. I hate that phrase. But let's circle back to the Tennessee-Florida matchup. And I know you've covered this extensively, but for those of those people listening or watching that haven't heard what you've said about it, can you give us just a general, what are you expecting out of this game for the Vols? Like, how do you expect them to perform? And maybe a score, maybe a spread. Do they cover? Do they not?
Well, we're gonna have Caleb on later. Like, don't give that away yet, Caleb.
Well,
All right, so I'll hold back on the spread.
Tell us where you're leaning. You can tease us a bit.
Okay, so I have certain rules with myself. I will say this.
Good. We all should.
Which is, one of them is, I won't say never pick Kentucky to beat Tennessee or never pick Tennessee to beat Florida. I will say almost never pick Kentucky to cover against Tennessee or Tennessee to cover against Florida. I think that those are some rules that kind of apply. I will also say, Amanda, congratulations on going 3-1 on your locks this past weekend.
Thank you.
I'm a little mixed.
Wait, and here comes the trash talking part. But anyway, I know where you're going. I know where you're going.
My gambling picks were actually great this weekend. I was 17-8-1 at the college level. I started 8-0. My problem is my locks, like the three I was most sure of, I was only one of three. I got the Auburn-Penn State game. I called last night's NFL game a lock, and I said the Titans would cover. Boy, did I get that one wrong.
It's okay. It's okay. Everyone did. It's fine.
Yeah. I didn't know they'd be putting a rookie cornerback on Stephon Diggs. And then I thought Tennessee would not cover against Akron, and they did. So overall, good gambling picks, bad on my locks. But yeah, I don't ever believe in picking. Given the last 15 years, it's really hard for me to pick Tennessee to cover against Florida. And it was understandable from like the 05 to 2010 range, because that was the Tebow years, the Urban Meyer years. But like since 2010, there have been plenty of times where Tennessee was as good as or probably better than Florida. And I would say from 2013 to 2017, the Vols had a better team every year, and they won one of those games, which was just it's like they were inventing ways to lose to Florida. And so because of that stretch, I've just gotten on the whole, I actually have almost been never picked Kentucky to beat Tennessee, and I'm almost at the never picked Tennessee to beat Florida. But I'll just say on spreads, I'm never picking Tennessee versus Florida on a spread or Kentucky versus Tennessee on a spread.
Take emotion out of it, Caleb. Take emotion out of it. I do this all the time. There's a reason I will not bet with my heart, so I never bet certain teams. But let's take emotion out of it. If you're looking at this objectively, and take also the back history, take all of the stuff that's happened over the last 15 years, pretend like you just started this season with Tennessee and Florida. What do you think? What would you expect from this game if you're Tennessee?
Okay, so just so people know, it's actually not necessarily emotion, because Alabama-Auburn, I always pick Auburn to cover when they're playing Alabama in Auburn.
That's
yeah. And so
as you should.
Right. I think if I were to ignore history, I would say that, gosh, if I were to ignore history, I would actually have Tennessee covering the 10-point spread. I'd have them covering it by 2 touchdowns. I mean, I could see a blowout in Tennessee's favor, only because if Anthony Richardson is banged up and that running game is taken away, he's going to get torched in the backfield by Byron Young and Tyler Barron. And I don't see, you're like Dave, what you talked about earlier. I think the biggest one would be turnovers. I think, and Hendon Hooker has 3 interceptions in his career at Tennessee, and he hasn't thrown one this year.
That's phenomenal. Just to sit back and think about that. I mean, especially we're talking about a guy who has some accuracy issues. I mean, Caleb, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. It's insane. And so this guy has 3 interceptions only in his career, hasn't thrown one this year. And Jalen Wright seems to have worked out his fumbling issues. A lot of that probably had to do with him missing camp early in fall camp. He's back in a rhythm now. So again, it would be hard to pick. It'd be hard to pick Florida to have any chance in this game. But again, that's ignoring history. Then I'm bringing history back in, and I said the same thing in 2017. Tennessee was playing Florida in 2017, and Florida had like 10 guys out, and I'm like, I didn't even think Tennessee was that good that year. I just didn't see how they lost to Florida, and they lost to Florida. But that was Butch Jones's head coach. But then again, Jim McElwain was on the other side. That was like two of the most incompetent coaches that you could ever see in the middle of a game.
Yeah. And then there was a shark. But anyway.
Yes. Oh, God.
That wasn't really Jim McElwain nude with a shark, was it? Who knows? So let me give you the injuries that Josh Heupel's not going to talk about. So I'm not going to ask you for an injury update, but the most significant of those would be, and just kind of list off these four. So you have Tyler Barron, you have Jabari Small, you have Dylan Sampson, and you have Cedric Tillman. So rank those in terms of if they were out or hampered, which absence would have the biggest impact on this game? And let's be clear, I think all four are going to play, but who does Tennessee need most out of that?
Of the four, I'm going to say Jabari Small. And I'm going to say that because Jabari Small is the one power back, the one back who could play the role of a power back on this roster. Jalen Wright played it last week when Small went out. He played it against Akron. I think what people forgot about the Pitt game, they looked at Small's numbers and only 10 carries for 17 yards. He had a 1-yard third and 1 conversion, and he had 2 1-yard touchdown runs. And anybody who watched Tennessee last year knew that they didn't convert those plays. And Small picked up 15 pounds in the offseason. So I think that Jabari Small, and I know college football changed. I know the game has changed. I know the schemes have changed. I still think in SEC play, this is going to sound so old school and so cliche, and I hate to do this, but I still think in SEC play, the line of scrimmage matters on short yardage plays. And I think that Jabari Small is the guy that can get you those conversions. And without him, that'll be crucial. I think Dylan Sampson is probably the loss they can sustain the most, mainly because they have Jalen Wright. And I think that Cedric Tillman would obviously be the second biggest loss. But with the way Brew McCoy is played, I still believe that Ramel Keaton has a lot of talent. I think there's a lot of depth there. And then Tyler Barron, if he's lost, you still got Byron Young on the other side. Roman Harrison can fill in for Tyler Barron. There's some options there on defense.
I'm a little, well, I'm not surprised, but some might be. Cedric Tillman is the most talented player of that quattro. Why did you choose your order and Cedric Tillman wasn't number one?
So this wasn't based on, it was partially based on who's more talented and who's a bigger weapon, but it's also based on the depth. And I think Tennessee has a collection. I think Brew McCoy and Ramel Keaton together could handle the wideout spots, and I think there's still Jalen Hyatt in the slot. And I think that's why Cedric Tillman, as big of a deal as he is not as crucial of a loss. Similar to how, I said this, if I were to do my top 10 impact players for Tennessee, we interview Cooper Mays a lot. I probably wouldn't have Cooper Mays maybe top 10, but I don't know if I'd have him top 3 or top 4, but he's in the top 4 of players the Vols can't afford to lose. I might have Cooper Mays number 1 because I still don't think Tennessee has a center behind Cooper Mays. And so
you could make a real argument, and I'm not saying this because he works with Off the Hook Sports. I'm saying this straight up. You could make a strong argument that he's the second most important player on the team behind Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, exactly. Because if he goes down, who steps into that role?
Supply and demand.
Exactly. And when you play out of the shotgun as much as Tennessee does, the center is much more crucial in that because of the possibility of low snaps and bad snaps.
Yep. And he handles all of the line calls, which there are times where he handles as much as what Tennessee does up front as Hendon Hooker does. And that's not coming from him. He didn't tell me that off the air, but that is absolutely a fact. So, do want to ask you today's tough question. And today's tough question is what, Amanda?
So college game day is coming. Who do you want to see as college game day's guest picker for Tennessee? And we have 4 options. You have Dolly Parton, Peyton Manning, Bill Dance, and Tony Vitello.
Of those, I'd go Dolly just because I think it'd be awesome if she were on. I'm going, guys, and I'm sorry. I'm still a fan, and she lives in Tennessee. I'm going Taylor Swift. So.
Oh my
God, no.
Oh my gosh.
No. I
Huge
don't think
Taylor
she
Swift
knows
fan
what
right here.
I like Taylor Swift too. I like her music. Well, her old anyway. She probably doesn't even know what a football looks like, if we're being honest. No offense
Probably
to Taylor
not, but she'd
Swift.
still be great.
Okay, well, she would probably I don't know. What are their colors? I have one more question to ask you, Caleb. Who's the most impressive Tennessee player you've seen so far this season? That's it.
Ooh, the most impressive Tennessee player I've seen so far
Who's
this season.
impressed you the most?
Right. I mean, I don't want to say Hendon Hooker, but he actually hasn't because he's missed a few throws here and there. That really kind of put me on the spot for a second. No, it's okay. I would probably go with Amari Thomas at defensive tackle.
Okay.
I thought that he was given the huge monumental task of taking on the role that Matthew Butler kind of left. And I thought he made a couple of mistakes against Pitt, but for the most part, it's underrated some of the stuff he's done for Tennessee. Was it 2 pass deflections against Pitt? I think it was 2.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me on that.
You know who I'm going to go with, and this is me falling back on the old eye test thing, is Rue McCoy. I just look at him physically, and I know he had a couple of penalties. I thought both were bad calls, so take that into consideration. But physically, he looks like an elite talent. Like Cedric Tillman looks really, really, really good. Rue McCoy, eye test, again, which gets me in trouble, looks to me like he's a top half of the first round top of pick one day in the NFL. I may be wrong, but just eye test, that's what I see, and he hasn't done much statistically, so that's a little out of left field. But just eye test, I've been pretty blown away by him.
He may do more this week if Cedric Tillman doesn't play, so watch out.
Yeah, I mean, he might be the go-to guy. So, Caleb, we got stuff cooking. We will have coverage of Tennessee's press conference on Off the Hook Sports. So certainly appreciate that, Caleb. We want to make sure that people like, subscribe, and share so that we can be a part of your Tennessee and SEC sports coverage. Caleb, great job as always. We will talk to you soon and have a fantastic day.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good one, guys.